Hello and welcome back to Crash TSET. Now, I remember as a kid borrowing games off my uncle. There were a few that stood out, but one stuck in my mind for a few things. Not least because I remember driving headlong into walls of freaking spikes. Okay, this time round, screw the protective race gear. You're gonna need a suit of armour as we play Track Attack. Released in 1996, that's the same year as Destruction Derby 2 for those of you keeping counts. This game was released on MS-DOS home computers, published by Microprose, best known for the Civilization series, XCOM, the Tycoon series, a hell of a lot of good games, but developed by Arc Developments, most notable for their Atari and Game Gear ports of Bart Simpson vs. the World, the Spectrum, Commodore 64 and Genesis ports of Bart Simpson vs. the Space Mutants, and the Game Gear Master System port of the Addams Family game. Okay, well, despite Arc's less than stellar portfolio, I mean, it was picked up by Microprose, and they've got a fantastic history of games, so let's just take a look at the game's USPs and we'll go from there. One of the first options it provides you with, to set it aside from other driving combat games, is the choice of car. I mean, there's only 3 styles, but all 3 look pretty good for the time in full 3D. Low polygon count, but the shapes are quite pleasing and quite distinctive, and there's a multitude of colours to choose from, not the full spectrum you would hope for like in most modern day games, but there's enough selection there to keep you coming. Plus you also get to choose your own sticker, which sits on the top of the car. Nice little feature, shame we can't have custom ones, but again remember, this is 1996 we're talking about. Now, for these rather nifty looking cars to race on, we have a selection of 12 courses to choose from. Most have a very futuristic theme to them, because this is set in a future where combat racing is definitely a sport and not just something in the realm of fantasy. Some of these are a little more themed than others and a little less futuristic. I mean, like you've got, say, a water course, the White Rapids, you've got a swamp style section, Gator Bite, and the snowy course, Rocky Ride. But the game has so much more content than just the 12 tracks, because each of these 12 tracks are divided into 3 heats, each of which on the same basic course, but sees a multitude of changes, which completely changes the complexion of any race. This is typically achieved with Track Attack's dynamic racecourse system. This is none too dissimilar to Fatal Racing, just without the loop-the-loops. But the racecourse can move, buckle, bend, twist, dip and turn. And these changes are not just static either. All over the course there's little skull and crossbones symbols to run over, arrows up and down, swerves left and right, and these two will immediately change the hazards and layout of the course as you go, either giving you an advantage in a shortcut, or causing you quite a lot of grief getting you stuck, allowing others to pass by. This system is fantastic in this game. It makes sure that although you're playing the same course 3 times in a row typically, every single time you start a new race, that the enjoyment is not lost. Besides the road layout, you also have to contend with the road surfaces. Sometimes there's oil spills, there's plenty of water in some of the tracks, and like I said before, there's one that's covered almost entirely in snow. This isn't just aesthetics. When you drive onto these sections of track, you'll find yourself veering out of control, smashing into the walls. Walls that could, say, be covered in various other potential hazards. You've got the pink bumpers that act like pinball bumpers. You've got flamethrowers. Oh, and yes, my favourite, the walls of spikes. So clearly this game definitely has a damage mechanic. So how does it work? Well, the car is divided up into 11 different sections. You've got the 4 wheels, you've got the front and rear bumpers. You've got the rear left and right side of the chassis, the front of the chassis, the main body of the car, and lastly the engine. As you take damage to these sections of the cars, they go from green to red in the typical fashion. The more damage you take, the harder it is for you to drive. And if your engine finally goes into that red zone, the car will stop moving entirely and your race is over. Thankfully, however, there are 2 possible ways to repair your car during the race. One such way is to find the designated pit lanes. Not every course has one. Once you drive into these pit lanes, intentional or not, your speed is halved for the entire length of the lane, and by the end of it your car will come out completely pristine. there's no dynamic system to watch the car slowly repair itself because you have to concentrate on not crashing or getting hit whilst in that pit lane. Your other alternative is to use one of the game's many pickups. Across the course you'll typically find a few wrenches hidden here and there that will help you repair some of the damage taken to your car. Occasionally it'll be for one section completely green, or it'll just overall do the car and bring it up from red to orange, or maybe orange back to green. Speaking of pickups, there are a couple of others. You've got the tyres which help your grip, especially when you're driving uphill. You've got the fuel canister which refuels your turbo, which is quite handy to have because you go considerably faster when you're holding down the turbo button. And then you've also got the various arrows, skull and crossbones and switches that alter the layout of the course. Be warned however, you are not the only driver that can use these switches or collect these pickups. The AI drivers can just as easily do the same thing. Now these AI drivers, there are 15 of them. You'll only ever compete against a maximum of 3 opponents in any race. But there is a cast of colourful characters to choose from, most of them being racial stereotypes, but again, this is 1996, we'll give it a bit of leeway. Unfortunately, from what I can see, there doesn't seem to be any unique AI involved. Every racer tends to race exactly the same, and the only difference made is when you amp up the difficulty, but it tends to drive a bit faster, a little bit smarter, and yeah, a touch more aggressive. So the bulk of this game is its season mode. In a season, you are intending to race across all 12 courses and hopefully complete all 3 heats in those courses. To qualify in the first heat, finish in the top 3. Qualify the second heat, finish in the top 2. Third heat, you've got to win it to earn the points. If you wreck your car, that's it. Not only are you out of that race, out of that heat, but you're out of that course as well. You wreck yourself on the first heat, tough luck, that course is over, on to the next one. However, you get paid a little bit of money whether you win, lose or draw. More obviously for winning, less so for runner-up positions. But this is good because this game remembers the car damage you take during any race and applies it to the next one. So you're going to have to earn lots of money to keep repairing and upgrading your car in order to become the best combat racer you can be. When I refer to this as the bulk of the game, I'm not kidding. I spent about 3 hours completing season mode. That's including all the heats, however not all of the challenges, because between each course you will receive a challenge from a fellow racer, betting you a certain amount of cash that they can beat you in a one-on-one race. This is a fantastic way to earn a little bit of money, but if you're not so confident, you can end up losing a lot of cash and not being able to repair your car and ending your season a lot earlier than you intended. Playing through those 3 hours though, I learned a lot about this game. I would not describe it necessarily as a full-on racing game. Most racing games, I put my pedal to the metal and I drive around there as fast as I can, braking only to go around the corners and generally avoid a few obstacles. This game however required a little bit more strategy, memorisation of the course and full use of all the switches and dynamic road environments. The handling is such that no matter how good you are braking around a corner, you could still slide out of control and smash into the spiked walls. And if you were lucky enough, you could get the AI stuck on the first lap with some of the obstacles, leaving you completely open to get round the course. Because this game does not employ rubber banding, so once you get yourself a significant lead out ahead, you can relax and coast your way around the entire track. Granted, this ruins a bit of the fun of smashing into other cars, but very satisfying to know you can win, and win very convincingly. So there you have it, a whole bunch of interesting ideas and concepts. Well, how did it all come together? Well, it almost works well. As I said before, the controls are quite loose. Going around corners you can find yourself sliding all over the place. Especially if you use the turbo at the wrong time, you will smash into walls, left, right and centre, bouncing off like a basketball. The sounds, whilst very good, repeat far too often. If you hit a spike wall at speed, most likely you're going to hit a few others, and the crunch just overwhelms the speakers and ruins the experience. Then you've got the other racers, who may well as not exist most of the time. Either you're so far out in front, or you're so far behind everyone else. You never see another race. You're essentially playing a game of time trials here. The HUD, while simplistic and generally out of the way and looking quite neat, leaves a little to be desired. The map itself is not so great. It keeps turning, so it kind of shows you where you're headed and which direction you're going in, But because I'm concentrating on driving and not paying attention to the map, I completely lose where my blip is and get very lost, and simply cannot rely on it to tell me where I am in relation to other racers. Now, whilst there are 4 camera modes, I generally sit in the third person perspective, and whilst that's a personal preference, I would completely recommend you do that even if you like first person driving, because the graphics are atrocious. This is a full 3D game with some of the worst low resolution textures I have seen. So don't get me wrong here, there are quite a lot of textures making the game look very pretty, but only in screenshots. Once the game starts moving, all of these colours and all of these textures end up blurring together in a sickening, vomit-inducing mess. Especially with the game's handling, and as fast as you're going, the textures are just... it is just stomach churning, it really is. I can't say anything more than that. There's obviously a lot of work gone into it, and a lot of thought and dedication going to make this game look absolutely gorgeous. But running as it is, you just simply cannot appreciate it. All in all, however, I have to say I really enjoyed this game, and that's not even with the nostalgia goggles on. I remember this game being hard as a kid and not being able to get to grips with it. The more I played, the more I realised the game's true mechanics were not really about going fast, but concentrating on strategy. And that helped me enjoy the game a hell of a lot more. I grew to appreciate the game, and despite feeling a little green around the gills from the visuals, I couldn't stop myself from playing. I wanted to get to the end of the season. I wanted to get to the end and see what happened. Not a lot, mind you, but I enjoyed the ride getting there. But for everyone else out there, what can I say as a recommendation? To be honest, you're not missing out if you're not playing this game. And to be fair, if you don't own this game, you're not missing out either. Yeah, the gameplay's fine in small doses, but it's not a game you're likely to come back to often. It's a bit of a novelty. If you've played it once, you're probably not going to bother coming back to it again. Whilst it's uncommon, it's also not worth a lot. I've seen it go on eBay between £5 and £12. So if you've really got to have a complete collection, then go for it, but overall, this is one for the archives that's best left in the archives. I've been Timus TSET, this has been Crash TSET. Remember, buckle up, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.